Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. At the end of video 17, we discussed 3 verses that explicitly show that every misfortune occurring in the physical world or within the inner world of an individual or a community is based on something written in a book, and the time of its appearance is completely determined. Does this viewpoint clearly imply the well-known doctrine of predestination, or can it be interpreted differently? I'm Hassan Moradi, and in this video from the channel Echoes from the Quran, I want to answer this very challenging and sensitive question. I will give a short answer without citing Quranic verses, and then a longer answer with textual evidence. The short answer is a comparison between 2 states of human beings. In the first state, there is me and my shadow. In the second, there is me and my servant. If I am standing, my shadow is also standing, but my servant may be sitting. If I want my servant to stand, I must command him and force him to obey. The important comparison here is the difference between a shadow and a servant. The concept of compulsion clearly applies to the servant, but we cannot apply it in the same way to a shadow. A servant is a being who possesses the attribute of will and can stand or sit, but a shadow is a non-entity, an absence of light to which we cannot attribute will. Therefore, the conception of compulsion cannot meaningfully apply to a shadow. In our discussion, if we consider God like a human being and all creature like shadow, we cannot use the concept of compulsion. But if we consider God like a human being and all creatures like servants, then we have accepted the classical doctrine of predestination. The important point is that both perspectives appears in the Quran. However, the servant perspective, which called numerical monotheism, is mentioned far more often than the shadow perspective, which we call non-numerical monotheism. In numerical monotheism, creatures are separated from God but under His supervision. Therefore, they possess independent attributes such as will, and compulsion is meaningful in this view. Non-numerical monotheism, no being inner or outer exists within or outside the infinite, solid, without porous, as-Samad, and fully self-sufficient God, to possess attributes such as free will. According to numerical monotheism, our claim is that God never demands blind and absolute obedience from humans. Rather, He wants humans to first listen to words, then evaluate them with their intellect, and finally choose the best of them by their own free will. According to non-numerical monotheism, there is nothing that God could force, just as forcing a shadow is meaningless. Now I will begin the longer answer with Quranic evidence. According to numerical monotheism and the possibility of compulsion, as in the master-servant analogy, we must say that the Quran never demands blind obedience. God gives glad tidings to those who do not rebel against the truth, who turn toward God and who live according to it. Then He tells the Prophet to give glad tidings to such people. Those who do not rebel against the truth are those who, when they hear words, reflect upon them to find the best and then follow the best of them. These are the ones whom God has guided, and they are the people of pure intellect. وَالَّذِينَ اجْتَنَبُوا الطَّاغُوتَ أَنْ يَعْبُدُوهَا وَأَنَابُوا إِلَى اللَّهِ لَهُمُ الْبُشْرَى وَبَشِّرْ عِبَادِيَ الَّذِينَ يَسْتَمِعُونَ الْقَوْلَ وَيَتَّبِعُونَ أَحْسَنَهُ أُولَٰئِكَ الَّذِينَ هَدَاهُمُ اللَّهُ وَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ ulul albab. Az-Zumar 18. The word lub means the untouched core of a fruit. Pure intellect means an intellect unpolluted by imagination and sensory impulses. This means that a person with pure intellect seeks the best idea and acts upon it. But a person whose intellect is polluted by imagination and sensory desires may understand the truth yet turn away from it and follow his sensory and imaginary cravings. Worshipping false gods means following sensory and imaginary desires that oppose reason. Repentance from this state means turning toward the truth and turning away from falsehood. Therefore, based on numerical monotheism, God does not want blind obedience, but obedience grounded in intellect and truth. When the difference between guidance and misguidance becomes clear to a person, there is no need to compel him to accept guidance, which is the religion itself, because every human naturally desires growth. What is growth and guidance? Growth is turning away from false gods, Taghut, and believing in God, who is the light and truth of universe. There is no compulsion in religion. Guidance has become distinct from error. لا إكراه في الدين قد تبين الرشد من الغي. Whoever rejects false gods and believes in God has grasped the firmest handhold that will never break. God is all-hearing and all-knowing. لا إكراه في الدين قد تبين الرشد من الغي فمن يكفر بالطاغوت ويؤمن بالله فقد استمسك بالعروة الوثقى لا انفصام لها والله سميع عليم. Al-Baqarah 256. Someone who does this is like a person climbing a height who holds onto a firm, unbreakable rope that prevents him from slipping. Thus, contrary to what is commonly believed, the relationship between God and creation is not that of a master and a servant, but that of a wise and attentive and a student who possesses the ability to discern good from bad and who chooses the best by his own will. Therefore, although compulsion is possible in numerical monotheism, God's method of guiding humans is not compulsion. Reward and punishment are simply the person's own actions presented to him in the form of an open book on the day of judgment, and the person himself is sufficient to judge his deeds. In video 17, we discussed verses about the copying of a person's or a community's book from the clear book. In the interpretation based on numerical monotheism and the duality between creator and creation, the action of a person or community performed by their own free will have a universal inner reality, which is the clear book. On the day of judgment, each person or community encounters the portion of that book that corresponds to them, and this encounter is either delightful or painful, because the reward or punishment is simply the inner reality of their own actions. But we can also interpret the same concept of copying based on non-numerical monotheism and the unity between creator and creations. I will now try to explain this new but very deep and difficult interpretation as clearly as possible. Before entering that discussion, I will briefly explain the terms numerical and non-numerical monotheism. God warrants that he is not on the same existential levels as others, not even Jesus, but that he is one. They have certainly disbelieved who say God is the third of three. There is no God but the one God. لَقَدْ كَفَرَ الَّذِينَ قَالُوا إِنَّ اللَّهَ الثَّالِثُ ثَلَاثَةٌ. the third of three. وَمَا مِنْ إِلَهٍ إِلَّا إِلَهٌ وَاحِدٌ Al-Ma'idah 73. Previous verse, Al-Ma'idah 72, says that some claim God is the Messiah, son of Mary. This verse says that those who say God is one of the Trinity are disbelievers, meaning God should not be considered equal or parallel to Jesus, because the true God must be one. This unity is numerical unity because God acknowledges the existence of Jesus but places him below himself. In another verse, God says he knows everything in the heavens and the earth. No group of three whisper together except that he is the fourth among them. No group of five except that he is the sixth, and whether fewer or more, he is with them wherever they are. And this knowledge enables him to inform them of their deeds on the day of judgment. أَلَمْ تَرَ أَنَّ اللَّهَ يَعْلَمُ مَا فِي السَّمَاوَاتِ وَمَا فِي الْأَرْضِ ما يكون من نجوى ثلاثة إلا هو رابعهم ولا خمسة إلا هو سادسهم ولا أدنى من ذلك ولا أكثر إلا هو معهم أينما كانوا ثم ينبئهم بما عملوا يوم القيامة إن الله بكل شيء عليم. Al-Mujadala 7. This verse describes a kind of existential accompaniment that indicates God's ontological encompassing of creation. This encompassing is like our encompassing of the creatures in our imagination. When three imagined people whisper in our mind, we are aware of their conversation. The interesting point is that God is not a force in a group of four, but the force in a group of three. Rabi' Salasa. Returning to the analogy of the mind, when I am aware of the whispering of three imagined people, I'm not beside them. I encompass them from a higher level of existence. Therefore, I'm not counted among them. This is non-numerical unity. In this unity, my imagined creatures are not separated from me so that I could count them alongside myself. Rather, they exist within me as manifestations of my mind. Thus, in a deeper sense, God has non-numerical unity. He encompasses all beings. This existential encompassing means He is with every being. All verses that describe real ownership for God, not social constructed, become meaningful through this non-numerical unity. In such verses, the grammatical structure indicates exclusivity of ownership. He alone is the true owner. In the analogy of the mind, I am the true owner of everything in my imagination. Therefore, I can do anything with them. To Him belongs the dominion of the heavens and the earth. له ملك السماوات والأرض يحيي ويميت وهو على كل شيء قدير. Al-Hadid 2. Or ولله ملك السماوات والأرض والله على كل شيء قدير. Al Imran 189, Al-Ma'idah 120. No, based on non-numerical monotheism, all existential books, such as the mother of the book, Al-Kitab, the clear book, Kitab al-Mubin, and the book of each individual or community can be understood as levels of a single book. In this view, the copying of a lower book from a higher one means that the knowledge of the higher level appears in the lower level in a detailed form. To understand this, consider the levels within ourselves. For example, our mastery of English language is an invisible inner reality like the mother of the book, Kitab. When this knowledge takes the forms of words and sentences in our mind, It resembles the clear book, Kitab al-Mubin. When these words are spoken or written, they resemble the book of an individual or community. Thus, the relationship between higher and lower books is the relationship between inner and outer, or between cause and effect. Each lower book is a manifestation of the higher one. The final book that is copied is the worldly action of a person or community which is bound by time and space. Clearly, in such a system, every being in a lower book and all its actions exist according to the pattern in the higher book. It and its actions are like the shadow of the higher being and its actions. This is beautifully expressed in the Quran. Alam tara ila rabbika kayfa madda zil. Have you not seen how your Lord extends the shadow? وَلَوْ شَاءَ لَجَعَلَهُ سَاكِنًا. If he willed, he could make it still. ثُمَّ جَعَلْنَا الشَّمْسَ عَلَيْهِ دَلِيلًا. Then we made the sun its guide. ثُمَّ قَبَضْنَاهُ إِلَيْنَا قَبْضًا يَسِيرًا. Then we draw it back to us in an easy drawing. Al-Furqan 46. For deeper understanding, refer to the video on the Great Resurrection. There it was explained that the creation of the entire universe is the expansion of a single reality, and the resurrection is the return and gathering of that reality. In the great resurrection, with the manifestation of God as the one and the subduer, Al-Wahid, Al-Qahhar, the shadow-like and mirage-like nature of the entire universe becomes evident. There are many verses in the Quran that are meaningful only through non-numerical monotheism. These verses becomes understandable when we see the relationship between God and creation as the relationship between God and His manifestation. As He says, He is the first and the last, huwa al-awwalu wal-akhir, the manifest and the hidden, al-zahiru wal-batin, wa huwa bi kulli shay'in alim. Al-Hadid 3. When we create an inner world in our mind, we are both the manifest and the hidden. The manifest, the creatures in that world; the hidden, the creator of that world. We are both the first, the cause, and the last, the effect. The creatures of our mind are not separate from us. The relationship between God and the universe is similar. It is not like the relationship between a potter and a pot, or a mother and her child. In this deep monotheistic view, there are not two separate sides, creator and creations, human and God, inner and outer, cause and effect. Rather, there is one author, and the words, lines, and chapters of his story are not separate from him. In this non-numerical unity, every action of a lower being can be attributed to the higher being. In one verse, God tells the Muslims that they did not kill the enemy, rather God killed them. فَلَمْ تَقْتُلُوهُمْ وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ قَتَلَهُمْ. And he tells the Prophet that when he threw the arrow, he did not throw it, rather God threw it. فَلَمْ تَقْتُلُوهُمْ وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ قَتَلَهُمْ وَمَا رَمَيْتَ إِذْ رَمَيْتَ وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ رَمَى وَلِيُبْلِيَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ مِنْهُ بَلَاءً حَسَنًا إِنَّ اللَّهَ سَمِيعٌ عَلِيمٌ. Al-Anfal 17. According to this verse, the good test, Bala'an Hasana, is that a person realizes during an action such as killing an enemy or throwing an arrow that these actions truly belong to God, and that his own relation to them is not real. God is all-hearing and all-knowing, and understands who has reached this sense of existential poverty and who has not. The Quran states explicitly that human will depends on God's will, that no creature can will anything independently of Him. You do not will unless God wills. وَمَا تَشَاءُونَ إِلَّا أَنْ يَشَاءَ اللَّهُ. إن الله كان عليما حكيما. Al-Insan 30 At-Takwir 29. From all this, it follows that in non-numerical monotheism, there is no independent essence standing opposite God, no independent external actions like throwing an arrow, and not even an independent internal action like wanting something. There is only one true essence and one true actor. In this view, God is like an author, and the entire universe is like the words and sentences formed within the author's mind. The stages of the appearance of these words and sentences are expressed through concepts such as ink, noon, pen, al-qalam, tablet, lawh, words, book, written, copying, and reading. All humans in this storybook are words to whom attributes such as will, knowledge, and power are attributed, and their actions are evaluated and rewarded or punished. As explained in the video on the Great Resurrection, the end of human journey toward God is reaching the realization that God is the only true owner of the universe and perceiving Him with the attributes of one and subduer, al-Wahid, al-Qahhar. But at the beginning of the journey, such understanding is impossible. The most a person can grasp is numerical monotheism, that God exists and creatures exist, but He alone is their creator and manager. In this view, a person writes his own book, and in the minor and major resurrection, he encounters the inner levels of his own writings. But in non-numerical monotheism, the main book is written by God, and the similar limited copies are also made by Him. In this view, there is only one author and his writings. Just as we cannot meaningfully speak of forcing a shadow, we cannot meaningfully speak of forcing the writings of an author. Thus, in numerical monotheism, the human being exists independently of God, though independent on Him, and he writes his own book and encounters it in the hereafter. But in non-numerical monotheism, the human being has no existence separate from God and is like a character in a story. He and all his actions are manifestations of author's thoughts and will. In this sense, resurrection, judgment, and reward or punishment are events within the story. The theological view in all religions corresponds to numerical monotheism, and the mystical view in all religions corresponds to the non-numerical monotheism. Just as a person standing on the earth sees the sun moving around the earth and cannot accept that the earth rotates around itself and the sun, a person standing on the grounds of sense and imagination cannot perceive the shadow-like and mirage-like nature of himself and his actions. May the day come when the humanity attains the ascension of knowledge, and from the highest of the unseen ghaib gazes upon the shadows and mirages of the world of creations. Thank you for accompanying this channel.